Morning, everybody. Thanks for attending this morning. We'll just give it another minute and we'll get started then. There's still people joining the call. Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paddy Green of Uisce Éireann, and I'd just like to welcome everybody to our Caring for Christmas webinar. Over the next hour, we have some great speakers lined up, all focused around caring for yourself and others in the lead up to the Christmas period. Christmas is a great time of year for the majority of people, but in saying that, it can be a very difficult time for some. And unfortunately, we have lost people within Uisce Éireann and within our delivery partners at this time of year due to death by suicide. I know it's a difficult conversation, but we feel it's important to raise the awareness and remind ourselves of the supports available should the need arise. We have some good speakers here today, so I'll just give you an overview of the lineup. We have Oisin McConville of Gambling Care in conversation with Anya Healy of Glenua, discussing gambling addiction. We've Gwen Harris of MABS in conversation with Tim Gilmore of Veolia, talking about money management and money management tips. We've Kieran Carey and Lauren McNulty in conversation with Sean Downey of the CIF, discussing drug and alcohol addiction. And then we've Sinead Keane of Spun Out in conversation with Anthony Skeffington of Uisce Éireann, discussing mental health and the sports available. And before we get into the conversations, I just want to share a video which can be used in the lead up to Christmas to open up conversations with colleagues and friends. So Darren, if you wouldn't mind just sharing that video, thanks.
Christmas is often seen as the most wonderful time of the year, a season filled with joy, family gatherings and celebration. However, for many people in the construction industry, Christmas can be a challenging time and can bring stress, loneliness and financial strain. High demands and pressure can lead to increased safety risks. People performing work tasks while fatigued, stressed, or under the influence of drink or drugs can't concentrate fully on what they are doing and pose a greater risk to themselves and their colleagues. Did you know that 1 in 3 people feel stressed during the holiday season? Or that there is a 30% increase in domestic incidents over Christmas? Each December, thousands rely on food banks, and tragically, each working day in the UK and Ireland, 2 construction workers die by suicide. This Christmas, let's be mindful of those around us. A small act of kindness or a listening ear can make all the difference. Remember, you're not alone. If you're facing challenges, reach out and share your problems. There is always someone there to listen and support you. From all of us at Uisce Éireann, wishing you a safe and supportive Christmas season.
Thanks, Darren, for sharing that. I always find it a very powerful video. So that video is available on the MI Safe website. So please feel free to use it as a safety moment over the next month, either at work or at home. We'll get started now, and I'd like to introduce our first two speakers. So we've Oisín McConville and Anya Healy.
Great, thanks, Paddy, and welcome, Oisín, today. We know you better for your football days, but today we're going to talk about gambling.
Yeah, I suppose like my gambling started at a very early age, 14 years of age, which sounds maybe uncommon, but I suppose that's the time that a lot of people would start in their youth. By the time I was 18, I was in a gambling addiction. Didn't know what a gambling addiction was, but I knew that, I was in bother. I suppose the things that it really affected was obviously there's a massive financial implication. You know what I mean? So you're constantly broke. But what I found was that very quickly it was starting to impinge on other things. I couldn't hold down a job, couldn't hold down a relationship. School was really, really tough. Any sort of focus, like the majority of my focus when I was growing up, revolved around gambling. And the reason why I turned to gambling was that I had a lot of insecurities growing up, a lot of insecurities around education, never felt good enough in school, all those sort of things. And I turned to gambling to try and bury all those things. So as I say, people see it as a massive financial issue, and it was for me. And I know Gwen's gonna follow up on this and give people practical advice around what to do financially. But for me, whenever I eventually held my hands up and said, listen, I have a problem, the biggest thing was not the financial thing. The biggest thing was the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions, building up relationships, being able to communicate with people. And I suppose people don't really see that when they think about gambling,
When you talk about the insecurities, when you had such a presence and such a commanding presence on the football field, like to think that someone might have those insecurities and that would come out in a gambling addiction.
Well, I worked very, very hard on perception. So I wanted people to have a perception of who I was, the way I acted. I mean, in 1999, I was the only idiot going about a Gaelic football pitch with a collar up. The only person I knew that did that at that time was Eric Cantona. But that was for me to show people that everything in my life was fine. If I had to get myself a pair of pink boots at that stage, I would have wore them, because it is perception. I wanted people to perceive me in a certain way. I wanted them to think everything was great in my life. And in actual fact, and that I was cocky or arrogant or whatever, but in actual fact, I was an insecure little boy at that stage. But I would do anything in order for people not to see that.
And it's such an impact, I presume, on your family, your friends. Did it, I suppose, affect you? Did you stop going out? Did you stop socializing?
I think one of the big things was that as a compulsive gambler, you're a compulsive liar.
Yeah.
So I was lying to my family for 16 years. Now, the funny thing is, whenever I went into treatment and somebody said to me, what's going on for you? And I said, well, the good thing about me is that I'm not harming anybody else, because I was oblivious to that. For a long time, I was in denial about the addiction I had. I didn't have any understanding around addiction. When I was told I was an addict at 29 years of age, I didn't understand that, because when I looked in the mirror, I seen somebody who was able to function in some way in life. I actually thought at 29, believe it or not, this gives you an idea of my self-awareness, but I thought in order to be addicted, you had to be laying on a park bench with a bottle of wine and a brown bag around it. I mean, that was the only perception I had at that stage. And over the next number of years, I was to learn that it was completely different. And when I started to learn about addiction, I started to learn about the practical things first and foremost, like my sister looked after my finances in those initial days in recovery. I wasn't carrying money around with me. I wouldn't even walk past the door of a bookies. I was doing everything I could to protect myself, but I knew I was never going to be able to do that for life. So I had to really put a lot of work into my recovery, to starting to talk and communicate with people. I mean, around that time, I could talk to you about cars or women or football or sport in general, any of those sort of things. But there was no thoughts or feelings or emotions or anything involved at that stage. In fact, I would run a mile. In fact, my father died in 1999 after a battle with cancer, but I didn't go and see my father during the period of time that he was in hospital. And the reason why I didn't do that was because too much emotion,
Yeah.
and I was too busy feeding a full-time gambling addiction.
Listen, I heard you speak before about the Donegal Armagh game when you got a text that morning from a loan shark.
Well, I suppose I had exhausted every avenue to get money. So friends, family members, teammates, banks, building societies, credit cards. I eventually turned to loan sharks. We were playing the Ulster final. They were playing in Croke Park at the time. I remember going into Croke Park. I remember on the way into Croke Park, I got a message from a loan shark to say that to watch my back today, that I was going to be got. So I actually walked out onto the pitch before the game. I looked around the top deck of all the Hogan and Cusick, and I was looking for somebody with a gun. Now I know that that's extreme, and I know now that that wasn't necessarily ever going to happen to me. But at that time, it seemed logical that something like that could happen because I was that far gone. And I went and I played in that game, and I don't watch games back that I played in, but I watched that one back because I don't recognize the person who's on the pitch. Because again, um, it was starting to affect absolutely everything. And I thought the one thing that was sacrosanct for me was sport, because that, believe it or not, sounds dramatic, but that was the one thing at that time that was keeping me alive, giving me a focus, giving me as if it would give me somewhere where I felt as if I could add some sort of value. Um, but it was starting to impinge on that, and I suppose it feels a short time after that that I went for help, but it was possibly 2 years,
Yeah.
before because in the end, banks, building societies, friends, would, uh, nobody was going to finance it anymore, and even loan sharks wouldn't touch me at this stage.
And I suppose when you reach that point 2 years later, the help that's out there for people.
Yeah. So I mean, I was lucky because within my family, somebody knew Sister Concilium. She was the first person to tell me I was addicted. You shouldn't be cursing at nuns, but because I didn't understand it when she said that, but I got to grips with it over time. And then I was introduced to a thing called Gamblers Anonymous. Received counsel. One-to-one counselling was when I was in treatment, but I actually went to Cúnmara in Galway and I spent 13 weeks in the treatment centre there and started to learn about addiction, started to learn about the things that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And I remember going to a talk, a guy called Tony Adams, who used to play with Arsenal in England. And I remember him giving a talk, and he said, the best thing I got from recovery is best thing I got back from my recovery is my thoughts, my feelings, and my emotions. The worst thing I've got back is my thoughts, my feelings, and emotions, because you're starting to feel things that never felt proper. And when my father died in '99, I didn't actually mourn my father. I had no tears. And I walked out of treatment in 2006 on the 1st of February, and the first place I went was my father's grave, and I actually cried.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was possible for me. And that just showed me how much I'd already traveled, even in the space of 3 months.
That's incredible, Lushing. Yeah. Fair play. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I just think for people who find themselves in bother, I mean, there's a very good resource, gamblingcare.ie, the website, 24-hour helpline, and I think that is the start of the process. If you don't feel as if you can share that with a friend, work colleague, family member, GP, go there. It's 100% confidential, and that can start the process to get from where I was to, I suppose, where I am today. You know?
Yeah, and I suppose coming up to Christmas now, like people are under huge financial strain with all the presents and everything like that, and then to have that gambling, you know, people with that dealing with that gambling addiction on top of that as well, it can be
Yeah, I
double
think it
stress.
probably seems logical for people to say, you know, instead of me spending all that money, I'll go to the bookies, I'll double my money, and at least that's Christmas paid for. But like, I think we all know it doesn't work like that. Like, this used to be something that you would say, right, this is a massive problem for people, or from young men from 18 to 40 or whatever it was, but it's affecting everybody now. 14-year-old lads, 80-year-old women, and I think the biggest influx of people into Gamblers Anonymous now are women between the ages of 25 and 45. I mean, who would have said that 15, 20 years ago? But that's the reality of how far gambling has traveled as an
Yeah.
addiction.
And you talk about going into the bookies where now it's all on the phone. Like
Yeah,
it's easy
exactly.
access and it's instant access. It's trying to control that as well.
So if I was to walk into a school today and there was 150 or 200 kids there, and I say, how many people in here have had a bet before, and maybe 10 people put up the hand, you think, they have a real handle on it in the school. And then you say, how many people have had a bet before? And nearly everybody puts up the hand, because it's alien to people almost now. To like 90% of the gambling that's done is done on a mobile phone or on a device.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, thanks a million, Oisín, for your time today. I think it's been an incredibly powerful. So thanks a million for taking the time. Back to you, Paddy.
Thanks, Anya, and thanks, Oisín. That was a great story, very powerful, and how you come out on the other side will be an inspiration to some, I'm sure, on this call, which is great. So thanks a million for sharing. We'll now move on to Gwen Harris of MABS and Tim Gilmore of Veolia to discuss money management.
Thanks a million, Paddy. Look, delighted here to be talking to Gwen. I suppose, Gwen, first thing I want to ask you is, what is MABS?
So MAB stands for the Money Advice and Budgeting Service, and we kind of do what it sounds like we do. So we work with people who around money advice, and so people maybe who are in difficulty financially now, helping them with budgeting. And maybe one of the things that we're probably most known for is talking to somebody's creditors on their behalf if they're in difficulty with bills or loans. But the other side of what we do is we do a lot of prevention as well. So we do try to help people get control or gain control of their situation before difficulties happen, and maybe learn the skill of budgeting, because it's something that we don't all naturally have.
Yeah, and I suppose I've done my research on MABS in recent weeks, because I knew I was going to have a conversation with you, and my wife has told me to listen to everything you say now.
Yeah.
But one of the big things that jumped out to me is that early prevention and how important that is, and to know that service that you offered is there is fantastic.
And we think, when we spoke beforehand, how I learned about money, and how a lot of people will have learned about money is by seeing it at home. It's called socialization. So you're seeing it. I see the cash, I see the bills, I see things being paid for. Now we're in a digital world. I'm very cashless by choice, because I'm a bit clumsy and I lose things. So I'm very cashless, and I get my bills to the email, and I get my pay slip to my email. So there's no paper in my house. So for my kids, they didn't really get to see that. And I didn't really initially, until somebody asked me about the magic credit card that they could have, that they could buy anything, sitting in the back seat one day, gave me a bit of a shock. And I was thinking, oh, I need to really start, kind of bringing education home. So anybody who does have small people in their life, whether it's somebody you're caring for, or if you're a grandparent or a parent, it is about having that conversation and making money a little bit normal. And there might be some people on this call who don't know what MABS is, never heard of us before. And a lot of the times that's because debt is a dirty word. And MABS is known mainly for our work that we do with people who are in difficulties. So if you came to MABS and you were in difficulty with your mortgage or a bill or a loan, we would talk to your creditor on your behalf, and your creditor is the person you owe money to. So we would engage with them and help to negotiate a new payment plan, something that is affordable and keep a quality of life for you as well. That's what we're mostly known for. And because of that, then a lot of people don't know about the prevention and education piece.
Of course, and look, it's fantastic, the service you offer. It's incredible. I suppose we're coming into a period now, Christmas, the new year. There's, I don't know, is it social pressures, keeping up with the Joneses, or for that present, for meeting those social nights out, even for hosting people, I suppose. Have you any advice on what are good tips to do for this time of year?
Well, two things to keep in mind is we're focused to Christmas, right? So we're focused maybe to New Year's Day. However, January is a long month, particularly so anybody who gets paid monthly, you could have 5, nearly 6 weeks to your payday in January. So your December wage, you really need to think, first of all, how much is January going to cost me? Take that out of your December wage, put it to the side. So very often when we think of Christmas, we just think of getting to New Year's Day, but we forget, and I'm monthly as well. So I have to think about my December pay has to clear for January, and it's a long month. It's a long month anyway. It's dark, it's miserable, but also there's that hangover from Christmas, that financial hangover. If you're paid weekly and fortnightly, it might be a little bit easier to manage because you'll still get paid into January. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to say no.
Yeah.
You know, and I know, look, budgeting very often sounds mean and, you know, kind of frugal or whatever, but it's actually, if you're going to sleep at night worrying about bills, and then you've got a social pressure about Tim wants to go out tomorrow night, and you know, and then next week Paddy wants to go out, and there's all of these extra pressures, and then like the presents, and if you have people who believe in Santa, you know, like I mean, parents have to help Santa out as well. So there's all those extra pressures, and as well as that, we have a time of year where our light and heat is probably going to be higher because you're in the house a little bit more and it's colder. We traditionally, everybody does it, we overbuy food at Christmas. So I don't think there's a person on the call who can say that they panic buy at Christmas, and you see everybody with the big shopping trolleys. And it's kind of natural to do because it's a celebration. But it's what we do with the food after that. That's the thing. So am I going to buy it, pay for it, and then put it in my bin and then pay somebody to collect my bin? Right? So am I going to pay for my food twice? Or am I going to be a little bit smart and maybe buy a little bit less, and then as much as I can utilize my leftovers? And I know that always sounds really boring, and everybody probably grew up having turkey soup one day, turkey curry the next day. But these are kind of, it's all the things that your granny did, all the things that your mom and dad did when you're growing up. They're the things that we need to kind of return to, you know, because it's about control. It's just a little bit of control. So for anybody who doesn't know what a budget is, right? So we start at the beginning. So a budget is a story. It's just a story of the money that's coming into my house and where it goes. And then with any story, can I change little bits of it? Can I change the ending? So we talked earlier about the cost of a bottle of water and a cup of coffee and a packet of crisps for a day, right? So it's over €2,000 a year if you have a small bottle of water, a cup of coffee, one bottle of water, and a packet of crisps on the go. And for anybody who's out and about, not sitting in an office, being in the car, and your restaurant nearly, your canteen being in the car could be a reality.
And that, I suppose, for a lot of people within this industry, a lot of us are on the road a lot. We might be traveling to sites. It's just so easy. It's
very easy. And look,
how do we break that habit?
It's the most boring thing in the world. It's about preparing, right? So it's about you know, kind of being like Santa, making a list, you know. So I'm making my list at the weekend. I'm planning my meals or whatever. Now, there's obviously going to be days where you're going to be tired. You're not going to really think, and you're going to leave in the morning. I've often left my lunch sitting on the counter at home, right? So we've all been there, and especially when we're busy. And be kind to yourself. You can't be 100%, but even if you make some wins, if you got 50% of your week where you brought your lunch with you, you brought your water with you, maybe you brought a coffee with you, or you decided to treat yourself on the coffee, because they're the little things that add up. And €2,000 a year between water, coffee, and crisps, that's a lot. And it's not saying don't buy a coffee. It's budget it and maybe plan for it. I think when we think of budgeting, we do think kind of cutting everything out, kind of like going on that grapefruit or cabbage soup diet, where it's actually it's healthy eating. It's a healthy balance. You know, it's a little treat, making sure there's treats in, but also making sure you've got your goodness. Same with the diet. You know, you've got your good stuff in as well.
It's as you said, it's that perception of it.
Yeah, budgeting has a bad rep, really and truly. But there's lots of little things that you can do to it's about having control yourself. It's about you having control about decisions that you can make about your money. Now, that said, there's going to be some that I can't control. I cannot control the cost of electricity or gas, but I can control how much I use as much as possible. The Reduce Your Use campaign that came out from the government a couple of years ago is not about turning off the lights, sitting in the dark, and turning off your heat and sitting in the cold. That's not what it's about. It's about turning off the lights in the room when you leave the room. You know, again, these things that we all probably grew up with our granny and granddad or our parents saying, you know, close the door, turn off the lights. It's small changes that can add up. Now, that said, I do appreciate that there'll be a lot of people maybe on the call who are struggling to get from one paycheck to the next, who might be worried about bills and so on that are there now, or debts that they can't pay. Never mind Christmas. So I would just say maybe reach out. You know, Paddy will share I'm sure the details of MABS, and it's on the video as well. But reach out. There's lots of different ways you can get in touch with MABS. Anybody who's online, just go on to mabs.ie and you can pick whatever way you contact us. But first and foremost, don't be alone, because debt is a lonely place. I'm here 30 years in MABS, and it has not changed once that every time I meet somebody, they're embarrassed. They feel ashamed, they feel guilty because of bills, because of debt. And then that's an even lonelier place then. And then they're going to bed worried about it. You get up worried about it. You're not sleeping properly. You mightn't be eating properly. You might be overeating, undereating. You're going to site, you're going to work, distracted, thinking about it, thinking about how you're going to pay, you know. So there's help there is supports there. So that's, if anything I would say to anybody who is struggling today, just don't be alone and just reach out maybe to MABS.
It's just on that alone piece. Would you find that, let's say a couple, for example, would you find it's one or the other within the couple, or would primarily be a couple coming together? Does it vary?
It varies. It does vary. Like we've met partners together. We meet a lot of people together, especially if there's joint debts.
Yes.
You know, like a mortgage or rent or otherwise, we would need to meet both people.
I suppose it's very important that they're sharing that with their partner as well, because you might get that side where they might not. They might be holding it back.
Yeah.
You know, it's great to know that those services are there from MABS. And thank you so much for sharing that. Is there one final message that you'd like to, I suppose, leave everyone with today?
Over Christmas. Again, don't be alone, and don't be afraid to say no.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Gwen.
Thank you.
Thanks a million, Tim and Gwen, and Gwen in particular. Thanks a million. When we first touched base there a couple of months ago talking about this, I couldn't believe the services that are available for free through MABS. So it really is, you know, an unbelievable service, and it's great to get that awareness out there. So thanks again. So now we'll just move down to the Limerick offices, actually, where we have Kieran Carey and Lauren McNulty in conversation with Sean Downey of the CIF.
Thank you, Paddy. So I'm really thankful to be here today to be joined by both Lauren and Kieran. The Caring for Christmas campaign really is about trying to reach as many of our colleagues in the construction sector as possible. And at this time of year, Lauren, I suppose this is perhaps when things actually come to the surface. I know those listening today value the fact that both of you are coming giving a very personal story. So perhaps give us some of your background, Lauren, and why we're sitting here talking to you today.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Hello, my name is Lauren McNulty, and I'm an alcoholic. Those 6 words aren't very easy to say, especially in a professional setting. You know, I'm in front of everybody here, and, you know, some people know me for my job, and that's a health and safety officer. But these words are the truth. And when it comes to the truth, that's where the change starts. So for years, I was focused on one thing on site, and that was obviously to have everybody go home safe, the crew go home safe, just, as they came onto site. But the problem was, and that was a very, very big ironic problem, is that while I was trying to keep everybody safe at work, I was actually destroying my own health and safety on site. And that was because I was struggling with alcohol addiction. I didn't actually admit it to anybody. I was so prioritized on risk assessments, on everything that you do for health and safety. And I didn't dare tell anyone how I was struggling on site. At first I didn't think it was a problem because it was like one of those things, I've had a long day at work, let's have a little drink. Or, it was a bit of stress, or I had a bit of pressure, on the life. Let's have a drink. Or, we had a good time at work, let's have a drink. So it just accumulated after a while. But slowly it's became something that I depended on. Any excuse, like I said, it was anytime I needed a drink, there was an excuse, but I hid it very well. I hid it to a lot of people. It started affecting me mentally, my well-being, being on site. I'm sure everybody knows in this industry, there is a lot of pressures in that we all face, but I didn't show up to work. And what I mean by that is I was so foggy. I physically was there, but mentally I was never there. And that was the hardest thing to face. So then, the irony is I was speaking to everybody, encouraging to speak up when you have a problem, speak to supervisors with anything of health and safety, including mental things. And I refused to speak up because I was too scared. I felt like I was on this pedestal of being health and safety, and yet I couldn't even look after myself. So that's where, it was a bit of a battle in my head every day about that. So, that's what addiction does. It contradicts everything that you want to do, it blinds you from your own danger. Even when you want to spend like all day preventing dangers from everybody else, that addiction to me blinded me from everything. Because why? I didn't want to admit I had a problem. So it came to a point where I realized that I couldn't carry on living the way I was living. I had reached a rock bottom. For myself, I reached my own rock bottom. But what I was very, very scared of is if I started digging deeper in my rock bottom, there was pretty much going to be a basement. And that's what scared me the most. I didn't know if I was going to make it in this life if I carried on drinking. There's always that saying in meetings as if, there's going to be 3 outcomes. It's going to be jail, institution, and death. And I wasn't sure which way I was going to head on to that. And I was sure as hell not going to go for death. Hence why I went for help. So yeah, as soon as I realized that, that was for me, the bravest thing I had to do was ask for help. I asked for help with my family. I asked for help with work. And the biggest thing is I had to ask myself for help. I know that's difficult, but I had to look in the mirror and say, you need help. You do need help. Yeah. So today, here I am. I'm 7 years sober. I've got 7 years of clarity in my head, 7 years of rebuilding my confidence, not only with the industry that we work in, with health and safety, but personally that confidence. I needed to build that up. It's more to be present with everything than, when you're having a drink, like I said, it was cloudy, couldn't remember. It got to the point I wouldn't remember what I wrote or said 2 minutes ago. Yeah. But I had that clarity. So yeah, it makes me a better person. I do feel for my colleagues, for my family, for me, it makes me a better person. I feel it every day that I have been present. Let's put it this way. Management and the job I work at, they got their money's worth in a sense, because previously I was just a figure on that shift, Now I think what the best thing is that this message isn't just for people in our industry. I know it is very important to all of us because we have got a lot of high risk roles and our environment is very high risk. But it's not just for everybody on the field, it is everybody in any job. That's the problem with addiction. It doesn't choose who's going to be, it's going to take over. I'm health and safety, and it took over me. So if there's anything, that I think that we need to do is realize that asking for help is not a weakness.
Yeah.
Reaching out doesn't make you a burden to anybody. It makes you a human being. And that's what we are. And that's how we're going to move forward. So if I'm going to be honest today, even if I reach out to that one person today, if anyone, can hear my story, my journey and go, that's where, I am, then every part of my journey has been worth sharing with everybody today.
Yeah, Lauren, first thing I want to say is, I know you said this is the first time we've really shared this in a public setting and especially in your work setting. So I really want to say thanks for opening your soul.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really powerful. Kieran, I know that you had, this is your second time essay as part of the Caring for Christmas, and you have a pivotal role because you're someone that people will identify with, particularly in your own part of the country, but also in the world of sport. There's a passion out there, there's a community network out there, but you just listen to Lauren's story now and perhaps reflect on that. Maybe give us your own perspective and tell us about the service that you offer at the moment.
First of all, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely listening, and it's my second year back, and thank Uisce Éireann for the invite again. And it's another opportunity and another platform, I suppose, to get the message out there in mental health and addiction. And lovely listening to all the speakers, Oisin and Gwen and Lauren, and even Gwen when she was talking about the financial difficulties, when she was talking about shame, remorse, guilt, regret. That's most people in addiction can experience them all the time. And when you're experiencing remorse, guilt, shame, and regret, straight away that's going to have a negative impact on your emotional self, your self-esteem, your dignity, your values, your believability in yourself. At that stage, you're emotionally fractured, and you mightn't realize it. So mental health without addiction is well and truly at play. And just looking back at my own story, when I look back with my adult eyes now, looking at the kid, I was emotionally broken and fractured likewise, but I didn't know it at the time. And I spent 20 years in the ring fighting alcohol, and alcohol destroyed me in every round. And thankfully, eventually I got well. I'm in recovery about 15 years now. I would have been through 4 different treatment centres, and I suppose I was arrogant at the time. When I'm looking back at the treatment centres, I would have said, that treatment centre isn't great, that one isn't great, that one isn't great. I had nothing to do with treatment centres, nothing at all. I only got well when I was fully ready to get well. When I had the towel fully thrown in, hands in the air, yes, this has me beating. And once I removed myself out of the driver's seat and allowed someone else to help and support and to drive, and it's actually get well. And in fairness, mental health and addiction is such a complex issue. We could be here every week for an hour talking about it, so we're trying to cram it as much as we can, right? And likewise, I had a wife and 2 kids, and unfortunately, the devastating effect for anybody who's in the throes of addiction is to their loved ones, and it's usually their wife, partners, mother and fathers, or work. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, family members can get equally as sick, if not sicker, than the person in recovery.
Sure.
So,
tell us about your service, what you do at the moment.
Yeah, thankfully, I'm working in the field of addiction. I'm working in mental health addiction every 20 years, working in a residential treatment centre for 15 years, and I'm kind of on my own, flagging my own banner for the last 5 Care counselling services.
Yeah.
Very similar to recovery treatment residential, but I suppose the big thing that we have to offer, it allows you to function and get on with your life. You're not removed from society, but it is a recovery treatment program. And it's an 8-week program. One is exactly like it is this morning, online, and one is face to face. And I need to share this now because we have 2 people at the moment who's engaging in the online program from gambling. One is living in France from Limerick, he's out there 10 years. And there's another guy from Limerick living in Boston. And both of them are 7 weeks in the recovery program, and both of them are gambling free for the last 7 weeks. So it's fantastic to see that. So I said to myself, you know, we need to go nationwide. So I'm knocking that in the head now. We need to go worldwide.
Yeah, well, the value of the technology officers. Look, Jason, I am really I'm humbled to listen to your stories. I really appreciate the fact that you come on this journey with us to share, because if people aren't able to share and give just their own perspective on where they were, where they are now, and signpost people towards services, then you know we're at a loss. So it's fantastic. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, and I know we will be doing more work with you here going forward. Thank you, guys. We'll hand back to you, Paddy.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Lauren and Kieran. To be honest, Kieran, and I said this to the team when we were booking you in this year and we were chatting to you this year, I was blown away by the response to yourself last year, like to the webinar, and really you are an inspiration. I know that you're an inspiration to a lot of people on the call last year, and so thanks again for coming back on. And to Lauren, just to reiterate what Sean said there, was very brave of you to come on and share your story. So it's great to get someone from within the industry to share their story. So thanks a million for doing that. We move on now to Sinead Keane. She's the CEO of Spun Out with the HSA, and she's going to be in conversation with Anthony Skeffington of Uisce Éireann. They'll be talking about mental health and the supports available.
Thanks, Paddy. I hope you can hear us all. And just say I suppose I work in asset operations here in Uisce Éireann, and we're delighted to be part of this campaign this morning. And I want to extend a warm welcome to all the operational maintenance staff that have taken time out this morning across the country. We've crews involved in water, wastewater, leakage operations, and we have them in many rural and isolated locations like Upper Islands and that. So I'm glad, I'm hopeful that you're all listening in and getting a lot out of the session so far. It's been great so far. So I'm delighted to be joined by Sinead Keane, CEO of Spun Out. You're very welcome, Sinead. Can you tell me a bit about Spun Out and the mental health supports and the services you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So Spun Out is primarily a youth information and mental health support platform, and everything we do is online. But a couple of things that I think would be really helpful to share with everyone today, just reflecting on, I suppose, all the different conversations that people have had this morning, and I suppose listening to people really being very brave and opening up about their own feelings and emotions, because we all know how hard it is to do that. And for some people, and it can be really hard to even know to name what you're feeling, never mind actually be able to look for help, or to, as people have here today, to be able to share that. So just to acknowledge that. So that's some of the things that we offer that I think could be really helpful to people on the call today is we have a tool called Navigator, right? And that's you answer 3 simple questions on our website. It's spunout.ie, and they help you find either resources or supports in your area relating to your mental health. So that's kind of a nice, easy way to do that. There's no signing up for it. It's all anonymous. And that's like for people around the country, linking you into your mental health supports. The other thing that we offer that I think would be a benefit to people here, and it's a benefit to a lot of people around the country, and this is for anyone, not just for young people, is we have a 24/7, 365 days a year messaging service. It's called Text About It. So basically you can message in, and it doesn't have to be a crisis. It can be anything from like needing just a calming chat with someone if you're a bit worried about something, or if you are in crisis, you message in and we have a team there who'll respond to you. It's a texting hello to 50808. We've had over 45,000 conversations so far this year, from people as young as 13 to people in their 80s who are messaging in. Most of the messages come to us between 7 p.m. in the evening and 2 a.m. in the morning. And that kind of leads into what a lot of people are talking about here today.
Absolutely.
There's the feeling of busyness that we all have. You're out working, you're really busy, you come home and you're by yourself, and suddenly allow space for those feelings and emotions to come up. And I think so it's when people are then feeling a little bit disconnected or don't have people around them that they can chat to, that we often have those supports. So again, that's a free service. It's totally anonymous, so that no one's going to be judging you or know anything about you when you're texting in. And if it's a case where we try and help people who are in a crisis to put a safety plan in place, or link them in with the emergency services if it needs to escalate to that. But a lot of people are messaging in about stress, about challenges they're having with family members, with their parents, their wife, their husband, with their kids, that they're worried about different things that are going on, or anxieties in their life. So it's really, I suppose, I really encourage people to give it a go, and it's something that's there 24/7, like I said. So if you're in bed, you can't sleep, you have something on your mind and you feel it could be helpful to get it off your mind, that's a service that's there for people.
Support service, and a lot of that information is on your website.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's funout.ie. Yeah.
And just another area, the really interesting area that I'm kind of interested myself is loneliness and that. And you released recently a research paper on the high levels of loneliness experienced in Ireland, especially in young people. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So for the first time, we took data from our people who text into text credit service. And what we found out was that 1 in 5 of the texters, loneliness was one of their top issues. So often we think of loneliness being something that impacts more of the elderly population, but we started to see that, I suppose, unfortunately expand across other generations as well. And I think it's important to just distinguish between two things. So like all feelings, we all can feel lonely from time to time, and that's pretty normal, right? We all feel sad, mad, glad, all those kind of things, lonely from time to time. But it's about when you're staying lonely. So it's about it being persistent, but then it's a level, something, a bit of concern that you should get some support around. And something I think that's been coming up since we released this report is, like, I suppose people talking a lot about how they can feel lonely when they're surrounded by people. So we've all known what it's been like, when you've been in a room full of people and you just actually feel really disconnected and feel like you don't have any, I suppose, meaningful connections with people. And that can be really tough. That can be really challenging. And what our research has shown us also is that loneliness often comes alongside other feelings. So it's often loneliness and grief, loneliness and sadness, loneliness and anxiety. So I suppose in terms of thinking about how we could support people through that, and like a lot of people have shared here today, what it's like for them to open up and talk to someone. But that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah. And we spoke a little bit about grief as well, and the loss of people, and how people feel lonely then, and we've had a number of cases of people, of colleagues dying in the workplace, and people feel very lonely, and that's something, another part of it, let's say.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really challenging. If you're in a workplace and one of your colleagues who is it sharing a space with you, or you're regularly emailing or sitting beside you at your desk, and suddenly they're gone, it can be really hard to actually process that and to have a space where you can talk about what that feels like, because that's a huge loss. It's a loss to you personally, it's a loss to the organisation, and it's something I think that can just be really challenging for people. So with that can come those feelings of loneliness and disconnection, absolutely as well. Yeah. So it's really important in cases like that to try and talk to somebody, and talking to people can be really hard. I'm a psychotherapist as well, and I know what it takes for someone to come into the room. Actually, that's that first step. Yeah, and it's getting in the door. It can be so challenging, and that's why it's helpful to have some of those kind of anonymous support services as well, to merely dip your toe in the water at the beginning to get a bit of a sense of what it can be like to talk to someone anonymously at home before you maybe take that step of actually stepping into a space, if you need to talk about things a bit more.
Very good. And are there other supports available for mental health supports available? What have you?
Yeah, there's a ton of supports available. Like, we've had loads of people here talking about the different places that you can go to. One that's really helpful, right? It's kind of like a one-stop shop. It's the HSE's mental health information line, and so again, that's a phone service you could call any time of the day or night. And similar to our navigator tool, they'll help you get support for yourself. So it's free phone. They'll tell you about what are the different supports and services available to you in your area. And it's, even if it's about you just calling up and finding it out, And then the next time you go and get the help, you know, sometimes it can take a little bit of time before you feel like you can actually say things out loud. Do you know what I mean? But it's about knowing that those resources are there. And ultimately, I suppose that even if you're feeling quite lonely, that you're not alone, that there's a lot of people out there.
I think that navigator tool thing looks very interesting. So it'd be good for people to know that and know where to get it.
Yeah, exactly.
So hand it back to Paddy. Thanks very much, Sinead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony and Sinead. That was a great conversation. And what stood out to me there was the tech support available, or texting support available. I know some people don't like lifting the phone or talking to people face to face, and it's a very simple and safe way to start that conversation and get the supports that are needed. So thanks again, Sinead and Anthony, for that. That was very good. So that concludes our morning and our webinar. We had at one stage 650 attendees, and I know that there's many groups in offices and on sites around the country. So it's great to have such a big audience for such an important topic. So just to wrap up, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank a few people. Firstly, the people that made today happen. So I'd like to thank Alan Morrissey, Darren O'Leary and Darren Horan, and in particular Lisa Garrett, who did a lot of work in the background to make today happen. She does a lot of great work for all these webinars, and we'd be lost without her. So thanks in particular to Lisa. Thanks to all the speakers for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us today. They're all very powerful topics and great stories, and I really enjoyed listening to you. Also, I'd like to thank the CIF and the Construction Safety Partnership Advisory Committee for supporting the campaign. It's much appreciated, and it's great to be, reaching beyond Uisce Éireann alone. So it's great that we're going beyond Uisce Éireann into the wider construction industry. And finally, I'd just like to mention the potential impact on your own safety and that of others. Construction sites are, they're dangerous places, and that's the reality of it, where we deal with a lot of high risk activities. And if your mind is clouded, it could put you or your colleagues in increased danger. And I think Lauren mentioned about, coming to work with your mind clouded, and it can put your colleagues in increased danger, which no one wants. So there's been a huge positive change in recent years. Attitudes have changed, and it is okay to come forward and look for help. So appeal to you, if you are in this call and if you are someone who's suffering, encourage you to reach out and have that conversation with a colleague or friend and take that first step. And if you are that friend or colleague and recognize someone is suffering, reach out, start a conversation and offer that support. Because I think it's fair to say that no one needs to suffer in silence. So look, from an Uisce Éireann point of view, we definitely want to ensure that everyone who comes to work goes home safely. And we all need to look out for each other and keep each other safe. Finally, I'd just like to mention that we did record the webinar, and we will be making it available on the MI Safe website. Yeah, we'll be making. Sorry, I'm just double checking where. Yeah, it'll be available on the MI Safe website. So if anyone that missed it or you want to share it, feel free to do so. So that's it from me and everyone in Uisce Éireann. So have a nice day and enjoy the lead up to Christmas. And it's probably the first time I've said it to anybody, but happy Christmas in the lead up to Christmas. So yeah, thanks everybody.